Hi everyone, welcome to another file deep dive walkthrough, and this is my most complicated grease pencil project to date. Not for the length, but for the amount of different objects and elements that you can see in the outliner tab. If we scroll up, it's got quite a bit in there. If I scroll around, you can see all the different layers. There is a slight angle to some of these planes, and that is because originally I messed about with the camera position when I opened the project, and I probably should have left it alone and then just moved the objects and planes further to or from the camera and then just had the 3D log angled differently. So I'm just gonna go through and turn off some of these other layers so you can see where the different elements are. This Tonight We Vibe was just the little logo on the tree. That's the whole background layer. The main character, the left-hand flowers, pollen, and the pollen flower that's being shaken. And then we have the pollen worker, the toadstools that they jump off, and then the workers and ladder. This grease pencil was actually the texture on top that I didn't name. And then we have these flowers, so they're the back ones, more back ones, and then the front flowers. So that is the whole project. So if I turn them on slowly, you can see them a bit better. We have the workers. And then the texture on top to make it a bit brighter. So in the shading tab, you can see these nodes. These are very intimidating, especially if you don't know what you're doing, but I followed a very good tutorial from TVPaint to basically just copy the different parts, and then I changed the color to what I wanted. Very, very simple, very easy. So it looks good if I take this light, where is it? The light. So I've turned it right down. This is what it looks like. And if I turn it up, that's like the medium color, and this is the brightest. So you can change that any way you like, which was really interesting. And then if I go back to the animation tab, this log detail, all I did for this was in draw mode, I changed origin to surface, and that let me draw on the contours of the 3D object. If I turn to the side, you can see there is a little bit of a gap between this. So you've just got to make sure that this is lower. I would recommend testing this out quite a lot and seeing how far you want the strokes to be from it. So you can change these and see what they're like. Usually I just stick with view. Now the surface of this log wasn't actually very smooth, and in TVPaint's tutorial there was another option that he added to his mushrooms to make them look smoother. I didn't do that because I thought the blocky look was quite nice, so that might affect the strokes as well. It's all about experimentation. And this grease pencil is the entire background of this project. It was so many layers. I did quite a lot of improvising on this project because I didn't really have a style frame to work from. So in this background layer, we have the lighting that I added over the top. It's basically just a green, lower opacity and set to divide. And it gives a really nice effect. We turn that off. We then have this, which is a texture that I added on top, and it's set to subtract. So it's the shadow, and I usually use the purple for that. And then we have this one, which is lighting. That's a yellow, set to divide. And I've used my brushes for these. So if you're in draw mode, you can access these up here. It's like charcoal, chunky, hatch, hazy, and speckle. And they're free to download on my Gumroad if you ever want to take a look at that. So that adds like some nice little lighting. And then this is brush dark, and this is just me adding extra layers to this project. So you've got the top of the mushrooms and some line work, and then the stem, the bush at the front with line work on as well, trees, these little wispy grass fronds that I can't remember the name for, this next outer grass wispy. All these layers, I would usually separate them out like this. So we'd have the entry, and then entry detail, just in case. For some of these other ones, I actually merged the line work and those at the same time. And then we have this line work for the tree, and then we have the ground, and then the clouds that stay motionless in the sky for the rest of the animation. So I was actually really pleased with this. It's one of the first proper times that I've actually been using materials in Grease Pencil. I've had a lot of people tell me that I should really be using materials more than color attribute, but I think I'll stick with color attribute for my rough animation so I can just quickly switch between colors rather than having to make new materials for each one. It's just a lot simpler, but materials are very handy. So this is what the materials look like for this project. So we have, I think this is the original line that comes with each grease pencil, but I didn't really use this. And then I try to name each one so I know what I'm using. And then we have a couple of ground and grass. This is the tree color. Most of these are set to fill rather than stroke, or fill and stroke. Brush. This is the line detail. I then have the line detail as stroke, and I usually go for this dark purple since I find it's a little less harsh than using black line work. We have the leaves, white wispy, clouds, mushrooms, mushroom stem, dark bush. And then this is my charcoal brush. And if you use any of my brushes, they have their own material. So if you see them pop up in here, that's the reason that you've got an extra material if you've used it. So that is the background. For the girl, this character, we had this color palette. It was so nice to just be able to change the colors and see what everything looked like with different combinations. In the actual how I made this video for this project, you'll have seen a couple of different variations of the color palette that I tried for her. So in her layers, we have the hands line work, the hands color, the hair color. And I separated out a lot of the different elements into their own layers so I could move them individually. The pupils that I had to move around and change. Eyes and eyebrows, and then the color, the mouth and the mouth color, head color, body color, hair top and color, hair behind and color. So if I just turn on the line work for these, so as you can see, without the color and just the line work, it all looks very, very busy. The timeline looks quite intimidating, but the way I structure my projects makes sense to me. I like to have options and be able to move different bits around without affecting everything else or having to redraw stuff a ton of times. So the way the Blender works with filling in color, if I pause this and let's say I want to color in the hands and I duplicate empty keyframes, I scroll up, you can see it here. And then I'm using the up and down arrow keys to go between keyframes. Turned it to fill, and I'm just going to go to my materials. Yeah, so let's fill in the hands. So the way Blender works with coloring, I've made a new layer, and if I fill in this area, it will take all the lines behind it into account. So if I want to color this in, I need to have all of the other layers and lines that are behind it turned off. So when I fill it in, it does a full color like that, because otherwise you're going to get these separations and very annoying to do. You can fill it in like that, but it's not going to be quite the same. You're going to get fractures within this, and it's going to take a lot longer than if you were just hiding the layers and putting everything on. So let me delete this layer. This is what my roughs look like for this character. I really like rough animation. There's such a charm and looseness to it that I kind of want to make an animation that is just solely roughs. I never clean it up and do something that's a little bit more experimental rather than rough line work color. With this project, I had a noise modifier set to very, very low on the rest of the grease pencil, and that gave it this really nice little boil that even when the character wasn't moving quite so much or something wasn't moving quite so much in the project, although this is a very busy project, so you probably wouldn't notice it anyway, this gave it that little extra bit of movement. If I turn it up, you can see just how far you can really push this modifier, which I love. I love the way that looks. It's so bizarre. There's different options. So strength will basically change the opacity of the line work. Thickness will, of course, change the thickness. This is great for any sort of glitch components, especially if you're trying to mirror or be inspired by something like Spider-Verse. Put the thickness on. Noise scale, you can make it really, really staticky, or a little, I guess, painterly or more childlike. You do the noise offset. And then if you just want to influence it, you can have it only on certain layers as well. Get rid of that to influence the whole thing. I turn these back down. And that is the character. Now we're moving on to these flowers. So the flowers, originally I was going to move them as a single object. Did not do that. I made them their own layers. So we have the texture on top. So this is just a single texture layer made with one of my brushes. I've drawn over the top. I put that all the way up. You can see it's quite strong. I've ticked masks so it applies to the flowers. There was a lot of layers in this, so I had to add them one by one. And it's on subtract. So if I put it on regular, it's actually green, but it worked really well for the texture. If I turn that off, you can see we have the head of this flower and the stem. Head of the flower and the stem. This project doesn't actually have them swaying in the breeze, but I did 4 variations of this project. There would be this static one where they don't really move, but the texture moves. I added another 2 noise modifiers for this. Both of them are a bit stronger. This one is for the texture, and then this one was for just the general flowers in the project. But when I animated these, which I'll show you in a moment, I animated each flower swaying, that I then duplicated the movement across the timeline to break up the animation a bit more and have a bit more interest in the project. This pollen and the flower that is being shaken, I zoom in, looks a little more complicated than what it actually is. We'll start off here. This is the actual flower, and then we have the line, or the little rope that is being pulled. And then this is actually the worker's arm. And we have the various different pollen layers, which are duplicated and moved across. So this flower, the way it's animated, I just timed it out with the worker. I have him activated as well, you can see. Pulls down. And the way this is set up in the 3D space, they're actually not that close to each other. But if you go into camera view, it works. It looks like they're right next to each other. So the way I sectioned out the pollen is it was behind this big flower, and I built on each layer, basically straight ahead animation. I didn't really want a ton of layers because, as you've seen, I like to separate everything out. So unlike some of my other projects, this file actually isn't too big, despite that there's a load of stuff in it. This file is only 169 MB, 180, 140, is a lot smaller than what I was expecting, even though it's only really one shot. You'll notice that I've been going through these, but they're not in the order that they are in the 3D space. They are actually ordered in their own collections alphabetically. So if I turn this on and then we move to the workers, I had so much fun with this. It's going to make a bit more sense if we have the log layer on. So here we have the ladder, and this is actually in a purple that I then made a new layer on top because it didn't really stand out against the log, and I wanted it to be the same as this material. So I made a new layer, I set it to mask, and I just added, if I turn it off, it's this bright, same bright yellow as this one, because I think I've talked about this before in the how I made this video, but as far as I know, there isn't a opacity transparency lock for the grease pencil layers. It's more like you add a mask or you use a material to change your color. I would like a transparency or opacity lock though, that would be very helpful. Then we get to these ones. So we have the line and the color, and the line and the color. And then we have the little sign that says they're okay in the bottom. So at first I wasn't going to include the sign, but I was like, if they've fallen and no one knows what's happened to them, it's going to give me a worry. So I just want to let the viewer know that they are okay. So these little guys, so simple to do. The design, I probably could have spent a bit more time on. They are originally from a design that I did a while ago, where they're on a little log. I'll see if I can find the image of the sprites on this log that I did sketched ages ago. And they don't have a face, which makes them more mysterious. But I think what I would do next time if I was going to animate these guys is have them lineless, and then maybe just add a bit more texture. The difficulty with that is I'd probably want to line and color them in TVPaint because of the blending modes, and the extra brushes that I've used in the past and made just make me a little bit more comfortable with that. So the way these guys were animated was I basically drew one of them going up this ladder, and then I removed the arms and legs and I just redraw them for each bit. I used edit mode to move them and then sculpt mode to add in a little wiggle. So if I go here and then we zoom in a little bit, you'll notice that they've stretched. So we have a normal pose and then a stretch. They move again, edit mode, and then I use sculpt mode to adjust. So they look very fluid, but it's really only one frame of movement, and then the second one is a stretch. And for each one of these movements, I've edited the legs, like redrawn the arms and legs. And then we have this one, and a scrunch, and a jump, and a jump, and then they're down and down. I've kind of hacked it. Like, I really enjoy animating in a limited fashion because animation takes long enough as it is, and my patience isn't probably as long as someone else's patience for animation who's working in a studio. I like to get things done quickly and move on to the next project, because if I stick with something too long, I'm less likely to finish it. But I really enjoyed doing these little projects. To get these two together, I just copied and pasted the layer. So they're very similar. The only difference between these two is this guy who's now jumping off the log, he only has single movements. There's no extra stretch with the sculpt tool. Remember how he jumped? Normal. And then watch this guy as he finishes up. So he jumps. And this one, he's bent a little bit. And this one, he's bent, that one. And then this is where we get the trip. And he falls. And then as he falls, this is where the sign comes in on a new layer. Pop and stretch before it goes back down. And then of course we have the back flowers, which are the same process as the ones that we talked about earlier on this side. And let's bring in the extra other layers and the girl. And then we have this as the final result. I'm super pleased with this. I really enjoy the look of this one, and I hope you found this little rambling walkthrough of this file helpful. Let me know if there's anything else you want to see, or if there's a future project that you want me to do more deep dives in. I will definitely be doing more of those as I make more loops and explore Blender and other programs a bit more. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again real soon. Bye.